The war between David and the house of Saul had dragged on for years. Abner, who had held Ish-bosheth's kingdom together, was dead, murdered by Joab in the gateway of Hebron. David had mourned publicly and declared his innocence. But now Ish-bosheth stood alone, without his strongest ally. When Ish-bosheth heard that Abner had died at Hebron, he lost courage, and all Israel became alarmed. Two of Ish-bosheth's officers, Rechab and Baanah, sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, saw opportunity in weakness. They went to Ish-bosheth's house in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They entered the inner part of the house as if to get wheat. They stabbed him in the stomach. Then they cut off his head. They traveled all night through the Arabah, carrying the head of Ish-bosheth, and brought it to David at Hebron. "Here is the head of Ish-bosheth son of Saul, your enemy," they said. "This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." They expected a reward. They believed they had done David a service. David answered Rechab and Baanah, "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, when someone told me, 'Saul is dead,' and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more, when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed, should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you?" David gave the order. His men killed Rechab and Baanah. They cut off their hands and feet and hung them by the pool in Hebron. They took the head of Ish-bosheth and buried it in Abner's tomb. David would not take the kingdom through the blood of innocents. He would not reward assassins. He would not build his throne on treachery. And by executing these men publicly, he sent a message to every tribe. He would not tolerate murder, even when it served his interests. The house of Saul had fallen, not by David's hand, but by the violence of desperate men. Yet David's swift justice helped convince the northern tribes that their fears of a vengeful usurper were unfounded. And now all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. "We are your own flesh and blood," they said. "In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, 'You will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler.' All the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron. King David made a covenant with them at Hebron. And they anointed David king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he became king. He reigned 40 years. In Hebron he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. The king and his men marched to Jerusalem against the Jebusites who lived there. The Jebusites taunted him, "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." They thought their city was impregnable. But David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. On that day, he said, "Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach the blind and lame who are David's enemies." Joab was the first to go up, so he became commander of the army. David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the City of David. He built up the area around it from the terraces inward. David became more and more powerful because the Lord God Almighty was with him. Hiram, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David, along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons. They built a palace for David. David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, and had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. In Jerusalem, David took more concubines and wives, and more sons and daughters were born to him. The Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, and they went up in full force to search for him. When David heard about it, he went down to the stronghold. The Philistines came and spread out in the valley of Rephaim, a broad plain southwest of Jerusalem, a natural corridor for invasion. David inquired of the Lord, Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands? The Lord answered, Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands. David went to Baal-Perezim and defeated them there. The Lord has broken out against my enemies before me, David said. He called that place Baal-Perezim, the Lord who breaks out. The Philistines abandoned their idols there, and David and his men carried them off. But the Philistines came up again and spread out in the valley of Rephaim. David inquired of the Lord again. Do not go straight up, the Lord answered. Circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. David did what the Lord commanded. He struck down the Philistines all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. The shepherd from Bethlehem now ruled from Jerusalem. The kingdom that had been promised, the throne that had been anointed, the reign that had been deferred, all of it had come together. Not through violence against the Lord's anointed, not through treachery or assassination, not through David's own scheming. He had waited, he had trusted, he had refused to seize what God had promised to give. And now the promise was fulfilled. Israel was one nation, David was its king, and the Lord was with him. In the next episode, David will bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, and we will see both the danger and the joy of carrying God's presence into the city. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing and sharing.